Pete Dominic, this is Laura Coates. I know it was your, my son just coughed during my surprise message to you. I'm sorry about that, but that's what happens with motherhood. You can't help yourself. Pete Dominic, I'm so proud of you. I love your show. I always have. You know how much I appreciate you. You gave me my start in radio, and I appreciate you for that. I'm so glad that we got a chance to connect and continue to stay in touch. Love you so much. Everyone stand up for Pete Dominic. Congratulations.
Stand up.
And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe. It's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, could these new canine biscuit treats decrease the potency of my dog's rancid feces? And with Christmas plans being thrown into chaos due to COVID-19, will I finally have time to binge watch some new hot and steamy Rick Steves? And now, the podcast host who can't wait to give his faithful dog companion his special doggy treats, Pete Dominic!
Yes, thank you very much, Pete Co. Thank you, Laura Coates, and everybody else who's left kind messages. Is that too much, opening the show with them? Do you like that? I've been doing it for the last 4 or 5 shows, and I really think it's fun to hear from those people, and I've loved to hear from everybody, and I love sharing them all with you. Welcome to today's show. I've got 2 excellent guests joining me today. One first-timer, very impressive background and career. She is a PhD, a professor, a political scientist. She got degrees from Yale and Columbia, and she teaches out at Stanford and Menlo University, Menlo College out in California. Dr. Melissa Michaelson joins me for the first time to talk about her fascinating new book that answers all kinds of questions about where we're at with the LGBTQ movement, and it's really well done. I think you're going to love my conversation with her. We also talk a little political science as well, and speaking of politics, I guess there's a lot of that on today's show. And in the news, what with everything that is happening in Washington, the Build Back Better bill, and the end of the year, and Joe Manchin. Well, I've got tons of reaction for you on that, and also a great conversation with Michael Cohen from formerly the Boston Globe and now his amazing newsletter column, Truth and Consequences. Dr. Melissa Michaelson and Michael Cohen both join me on today's podcast, and welcome to all of you. Thank you guys very much for press and play, for hanging out. I'm not going to say today's show is going to be the best show ever, because most of my audio is related to the fallout and aftermath and reactions to the horrible move from Joe Manchin voting to Deep Six the Build Back Better bill, at least for now and maybe forever. But both the conversations with both my guests are really great, and I'm very excited to welcome a new guest into the show anytime I can, especially when it's this very respected academic professor who I had a really fun and thoughtful conversation with. But how are you? I hope everything is good on your Christmas week. It's going to be posting podcasts each and every day. Let me know who you want to hear from. Maybe you'll be the guest. A couple of regular listeners that I'll be interviewing, I think, this week as well. I had a very productive day of local activism, maybe you could say, just trying to work to support our local schools and our principal. Me and talking with local politicians, creating and building relationships, bringing folks into the know and what's happening. And it's been great, feeling very purposeful and actually making progress, albeit sometimes little steps, but definite progress. And that's feeling great. If you're doing something local, I'd always love to hear about it. And I'm begging you to get involved if you aren't already, especially with what's happening in the schools across the country. But let's get to that news segment that we always love to do right here at the top. It's time, ladies and gentlemen, for The Last 24. Well, I don't really have any sound related to COVID, but as I said yesterday, we might be done with COVID, but it's not finished with us. I mean, everybody's saying that kind of phrase. But Omicron accounted for 73% of recent COVID-19 cases, according to the CDC. President Biden tested negative after contact with a staff member who was infected with the virus. Whoo, lucky escape there. Omicron surge has pushed elite colleges back into the 2020 mode. President Trump, former President Trump, said he revealed that he got the COVID vaccine booster shot. And I've got that for you. Let me play that one for you real quickly, because this is actually very important really important. This is former president, I did it again, for a disgraced former president, Donald Trump, on stage in a sparsely populated arena. I don't even know where this was. I don't care. I think maybe Texas, with also disgraced former Fox News host Bill O'Reilly. Both guys who are serial abusers of women. I think that was the name of the tour that they're doing. Anyway, this was the conversation, and this is good, actually. Trigger alert, you're about to hear the voice of the man who was the leader of our long national nightmare for 4 years.
But look, we did something that was historic. We saved tens of millions of lives worldwide. We, together, all of us, not me, we got a vaccine done, 3 vaccines done, and tremendous therapeutics like Regeneron and other things that have saved a lot of lives. We got a vaccine done in less than 9 months. It was supposed to take from 5 to 12 years. Because of that vaccine, millions and millions of people, I think this would have been the Spanish flu of 1917, where up to 100 million people died. This was going to ravage the country far beyond what it is right now. Take credit for it. Take credit for it. What we've done is historic. Don't let them take it away. Don't take it away from ourselves. You're playing right into their hands when you sort of like, oh, the vaccine. If you don't want to take it, you shouldn't be forced to take it. No mandates, but take credit because we saved tens of millions of lives. Take credit. Don't let them take that away from you.
Okay, so the president made news.
Do you agree with that?
Right? Both the president and I are vaxxed, and did you get the booster?
Yes.
I got it too. Okay, so...
Don't. That's it's a very tiny group of it.
Well, what do you make of that, folks? What do you make of that? Just the day before, yesterday, Florida governor was asked the same question on Fox Business, and he did not answer. He would not answer whether or not he got the booster. He's like, I got it. Got a shot with a C. It was awful. If you heard that comment on social media, I played it on yesterday's show. But Trump admitting that he got the booster, O'Reilly too. Is that a good thing? I say yes, and that Democrats should make an ad with him saying that and not say that they're Democrats. Spread that far and wide? What do you think? All right, well, now in other COVID-related news, what else can I tell you? Broadway canceled performances due to COVID cases. The Ohio National Guard is dispatched to hospitals as COVID cases surge there. Across the world, the UK health minister didn't rule out new COVID restrictions before Christmas, and new supply chain crisis, medical supplies. According to Axios, Omicron cases doubling 1.5 to 3 days in places with local spread. That's all I've got for you, really, on the COVID news update for today. Most of the rest of the sound I've got for you deals with reactions from mostly House Democrats and others to Joe Manchin's killing, at least temporarily, of the Build Back Better bill to deliver coal not only in the stockings of West Virginia workers that dug it out of the ground, but the rest of the country as well. Let's start with one of the progressive leaders in the House, a superstar from Queens, New York. It's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
It is extremely difficult to hold together a House majority. And, especially with the razor-thin margin that we have around this agenda. So the idea that Joe Manchin says he can't explain this back home to his people is a farce. I mean, it's a farce in terms of, plain democracy, because I represent more or just as many or more people than Joe Manchin does.
And she goes on. She persists, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I like it.
Well, I think what Senator Manchin did yesterday represents such an egregious breach of the trust of the president. And it's also, this is exactly why it's an outcome that we had warned about well over a month ago, about needing to plan a contingency plan for it. It's why we insisted on having the bipartisan infrastructure plan coupled and passed together with the Build Back Better Act. But I think right now we are at a juncture where it's not really about, I think, being being I mean, of course, we have every right to be furious with Joe Manchin, but it's really up to leadership in the Democratic Party who, made the decision to get us to this juncture and how we're going to move forward. And I think right now that Democratic leadership has a very large number of tools at their disposal, the president particularly, and it's really about time that, we take the kid gloves off and we start using them to govern for working families in this country.
And I'm not sure exactly what that means, what she means by taking the kid gloves off, what the president can do on himself with executive orders. That is a question that a lot of people are asking and debating right now. But let's move on with more. Another member of what is referred, I think respectfully, to as the Squad. Here is Cori Bush from, I believe she's from district near St. Louis, Missouri.
It is not a huge surprise. We have been, and let me be clear, there are 6 of us who had been saying this all along. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, Representative Presley, Representative Tlaib, Representative Bowman, Representative Omar, and myself. We have been saying this for weeks that this would happen, and we took the hits. We were told that we were anti our caucus, we were anti-democracy, we were anti this and that, when actually what we were and what we still are is pro the people.
Yeah, me gusta. I like that message. I think she is a really great and passionate communicator, Congresswoman Cori Bush. And now let's go to Congresswoman Jayapal, who is also a leader in the Progressive Caucus of the House.
The reality is we have an opportunity to deliver, and we worked from cutting the bill from $6 trillion to $3.5 trillion to $1.75 trillion, that framework that the president and Senator Manchin committed to. And that is what we now need to deliver on. And we are not going to stop because it is too important. We will fight, but we need to use every tool in toolbox, and that's both legislation and executive action. Now here is the president's spokeswoman, Jen Psaki, talking about this at yesterday's White House press briefing.
Does the president still trust Senator Manchin?
Again, I understand the questions here, but our focus is on moving forward. I think our statement yesterday made clear what the course of events were over the last couple of weeks. It was important for the American people to know and see that. But he considers Senator Manchin a longtime friend, and our focus is on moving forward and getting this done.
Are you confident that all 49 other members of the Democratic caucus are still on board with Build Back Better?
I think, looking ahead? Sure, I understand that. I can't obviously speak for all of them, but I think you saw quite a bit of unanimity yesterday in the response of people and their desire from across the Democratic Party and the desire to get this legislation done.
What would be his message to progressives who he asked to hang with him as things moved over to the Senate, now that what many of them warned has happened?
Well, I would say, one, his message would be we need to work together to get this done, and he's going to work like hell to get it done. And that would be his message. And January is an opportunity to do exactly that.
Quickly on Ukraine.
All right, a little bit more from, how about another dollop, another scoop full of comments and answers from Jen Psaki. She's always good for some pretty thoughtful sound bites, out of context even.
I will say that from the president's viewpoint, and I saw him this morning, he's worked with Senator Manchin over the course of decades. They share fundamental values. They're longtime friends. That has not changed. And what's most on the president's mind is the risk of inaction. And if we do not act to get this legislation done and the components in it, not only will costs and prices go up for the American people, but also we will see a trajectory in economic growth that is not where we want it to be. And we've seen projections from Goldman Sachs and others today on that front. So he's no stranger to legislative challenges. And we are going to continue to take steps, work like hell to get it done.
All right. Well, we were at the House, then we went to the White House. Let's go back to the House where Congressman Dean Phillips of Minnesota, who is a bit more, shall we say, a moderate. He doesn't like the strategy of criticizing Joe Manchin because he doesn't think it's going to get Democrats what they want. Fair approach? You tell me. Here's Representative Dean Phillips of Minnesota's 3rd District. Fighting 3rd.
Start with conversation versus condemnation. Yes, there are elements of it that he is not thrilled with. And look, we have to inject some pragmatism into the circumstance. We have a system of government that makes this tedious. It's designed to make change difficult. And boy, we are witnessing that right now. So let's recognize what we need. We need him, plain and simple. We need his vote. So all of those who are throwing fire at him, do so at our collective peril. So we have to sit down in January, clear our heads and our hearts a little bit. There is a path forward, and I have faith that we will get this done. And I would ask that the White House and fellow Democrats who are disappointed, I'm among them, by the way, Jim, I'm terribly disappointed. But if we wish to still accomplish this, my message is simple. Let's not give up. We have 10 months until the next election with the current very thin majorities in place. Let's not give up. And in my experience, the way many of my colleagues are approaching this, I'm afraid will result in exactly what we do not want, which is nothing.
All right, let's go for one more. This is Congresswoman Madeline Dean. She is a House member from Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, the 4th District of Pennsylvania. The Fighting Fourth, Madeline Dean. You may recognize her from such appearances like the second House impeachment of Donald Trump.
Mr. Manchin is at a low moment in his career. He misled the president. He misled the Senate colleagues. He misled us in the House when he promised to work and move forward on the framework that was agreed to a few weeks or a couple of months ago now. We worked in earnest based on that promise, but he has gone back on his word. And I was thinking about it. The only thing that we have as legislators are our words. And the only thing of value we have is our word. Mr. Manchin has gone back on his word, throwing away his own credibility. Where we go from here is we keep fighting for Build Back Better because we know it is in America's interest. It is for the greater good. It is for our children and our planet and our seniors. We're going to keep fighting. I'm pleased with Senator Schumer, who will bring this bill to the floor to expose all of the senators in terms of where they stand for this very popular investment in our future.
All right, well, I'm going to have to wrap up the audio part of the news segment, the last 24, because it's time to get to all of the rest of the headlines, and there are plenty of them today. Rapid fire style. You can look them all up and read more about them, be in the know, and understand what's happening in the world around you. It's time for the news dump. Pete Coe with another original jingle.
Stray cows in India, authorities in a huff. They're causing grievous injuries on today's news dump.
Uh-oh, I don't want to know what's going on with the cows in India, do you? Let's move along. Thank you, Pete Coe, as always. Well done, sir. Let's start in California, where a very strong earthquake hit Northern California. No tsunami or major damage, but a 6.2 magnitude earthquake struck the Northern California coast. Speed of Pete Coe. Everybody all right out there in Northern California? Listeners, come on, leave a voicemail. Let me know how you fared. 209-STAND-UP. You want to leave a message, or you can always email me, standuppapete@gmail.com. The dead now count more than 200 in the Philippines after a typhoon has slammed that country. Mentioned that number last night has gone up over 40, I think. Terrible situation in the Philippines. The space tourists have left the space station and safely returned to Earth. How about that? Japanese billionaires, producer, and a Russian cosmonaut have safely returned to Earth after spending 12 days on the International Space Station. Guy's a fashion tycoon, apparently, and his producer and... really? Gotta bring Keith with me to the space station. We have a producer. And then a Russian cosmonaut made a soft landing in the Russian Soyuz capsule in Kazakhstan at 9:13 a.m. yesterday. Speaking to Associated Press last week in a live interview from the orbiting space station, the Japanese billionaire Maezawa said, "Once you are in space, you realize how much it is worth by having this amazing experience." What? That's the profound statement that he came up with? Okie doke. Of course, the Japanese billionaire was criticized for spending money on space travel instead of using it to help people back on Earth, saying that those who criticize are perhaps those who have never been to space. That's what he said. This guy sounds like kind of a dick. I don't know anything about him, but of course they haven't been to space. There's only like 12 people that have gone to space, you jackass. Anyway, so glad you're home safely. And speaking of rich people and rich things, the Davos Economic Forum, which is set to take place next month, will be postponed until the summer because of concerns over COVID-19's Omicron outbreak. Notable people who have tested positive for COVID: Governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, and CNBC's Jim Cramer, two that I noticed on Monday. Starbucks announced that it will negotiate in good faith with workers who voted to unionize. I think they have to. I'm not sure they get to say that even, but they're trying to make themselves look good? Okay, well, that's a major, major triumph for organized labor. The Queen has canceled the British royal family's Christmas gathering. Everything's getting canceled. Oh, dear. The fallout continues for actor Chris Noth of Sex and the City fame. His talent agency has now dropped him amid allegations of sexual assault misconduct. According to the Los Angeles Times, last week, 2 women accused Chris Noth of sexual assault in a lengthy account in The Hollywood Reporter. After the allegations emerged, actress and director Zoe Lister-Jones accused him of misconduct, including inappropriate comments on the set of Law & Order. Chris Noth, the latest famous actor or man to be outed as a, seems like a regular asshole. As long as Hasselhoff doesn't get canceled, everything's going to be okay. Wait, didn't he get canceled a long time ago? I forget. Speaking of rising from the ashes of cancellation, comedian Louis C.K., who I knew back in the day, he has put out a new special, self-produced special, and I don't know, have anything to say about that, but the reason I bring it up is because people always talk about folks getting canceled, and it looks like Louis C.K. is doing, well, just fine. And finally, I should have probably mentioned this at the top, but today is the shortest day and the longest night. That's right, the winter solstice is Tuesday. Welcome back, winter. The winter solstice, of course, marking the beginning of astronomical winter in the northern hemisphere, is today, the precise moment at which the northern hemisphere is tilted farthest from the sun. The solstice occurs at the same instant everywhere on Earth. Here in the U.S., it happens at 10:59 a.m., on Tuesday, December 21st. I have to set an alarm right now to wish a winter solstice to my family first in our family text, and then a happy winter solstice to all of you on social media. Got any traditions? How are you feeling about it? It means the days are just getting longer from here on out. How about that for a silver lining? All right, well, that is all the news I've got for you, and it's a whole bunch, and I appreciate you appreciating it. So I also am going to give you a break and no ad read today. I'm running out of time. I'll have to pile them up or something, but I got to get this baby up and out. And so let me get to my guests, shall we? Very excited to have Melissa Michaelson, Dr. Professor Melissa Michaelson, joining me for the first time ever on today's show. That is coming up. Amazing conversation with her about her new book about LGBTQ, the history and current present state of the movement. But first, I've got a great conversation with former Boston Globe columnist, former State Department speechwriter, and now he's gone independent just like me, and I want you to support him. His Substack is great. Truth and Consequences is the name of his Substack newsletter that you can get twice a week. He's also putting out conversations in podcast format, truthandcons.substack.com. He had a great conversation with my friend Jared Yates Sexton a couple days ago that I really enjoyed watching. I actually joined it and just sat there as a viewer and watched the two of them debate, discuss, and chat about important issues. I highly recommend you subscribe to Michael Cohen. Definitely follow him on Twitter at SpeechBoy71. So good on Twitter. He's written a recent piece at MSNBC where he is also a regular contributor at SpeechBoy71, I should say, on Twitter. My latest conversation with the real, the authentic, the actual Michael Cohen. No, not that one. Okay, the great Michael Cohen, the real Michael Cohen, joins me now to talk about all things that used to be Build Back Better and the latest wave of Omicron and more. Michael Cohen in his Brooklyn headquarters, yes?
That's correct, in the Brooklyn headquarters, yes.
What will you be doing for Christmas week? What with the fact that you don't really celebrate Christmas?
Just trying to not get COVID. Yeah. I'm going to Cancun in early January, and I would like to not have the trip canceled because of COVID. So that's my number one priority, is not to get sick.
That is exciting that you're going there. I'm starting to feel a little bit weird, like there's no way not to get it. And I kind of wonder, do you always wonder? I spend way too much thinking about how a person got it. I guess you're not even supposed to be, probably shouldn't even ask. But like I'm pretty lucky because I work from my shed. But like, right. Do you feel like it's inevitable at this point, and that yes. you'll be okay because you got the 3 shots?
That's basically how I feel. And part of me almost wants to get it now just so I can get sick and get it over with so that I can then, not have to worry about missing my trip.
Really? You going to go lick a doorknob or make out with a victim?
Well, that wouldn't be different than really how I live most of my life. So.
That's your normal operating procedure.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's wild to hear you say that because you've been, so I think responsible and safe and also, pretty good about, protecting yourself and your family.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's been, my focus, but, I had COVID early on, probably figured out after the fact because I did an antibody test. And so, I haven't worried that much about getting it. I obviously have both my vaccines and the booster shot, which means I'm protected. And in fact, I'm not that worried about getting it. I mean, as far as my health, I have 3 shots. What I worry about, again, is the impact on my life and my ability to do things that I enjoy. Going to Cancun for 5 days in January is something I'm going to enjoy. And I will not enjoy it if I'm going to be, back in the States.
Yeah, I mean, we thought it was, I was pretty safe about booking gigs, like not wanting to book gigs, unless somebody came through and offered a lot of money or it was a favor. I really wasn't ambitious about it. But, I thought things were getting better, that we could book gigs. And Christian Finnegan and Ophira Eisenberg and we've got 3 gigs in January at theaters, little venues. And now it's like, these gigs, this might not be a good idea. It's right. Sucks.
It does. There's no way around it. It sucks.
How do you deal with a 4th wave of disappointment?
4th. I mean, I feel like it's more than that. I mean, it's totally different. I mean, I guess to me, we're just in a different place in the sense that, this is not like March 2020. I'm fully vaccinated, and so it's a miracle that so many people have gotten vaccinated. And because of that, I'm just not concerned about getting sick. I mean, I think it's such a different, I remember going out in like early April to like the Target or something and just like being in absolute anxiety over the fact that I was around so many people.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel that way now. I mean, I feel anxiety about being around people in general, just not particularly has to do with COVID.
I wanted to play a clip for you. I know you've heard it though, and I will have played it earlier, but of former President Trump with Bill O'Reilly. And O'Reilly asks him, did you get the booster? And Trump hesitates for a second. He says, yeah. And then he goes on this whole minute-long rant about why we shouldn't play into their game. And I saw that you tweeted it and said, this is almost 90% right, and I agree with it. And I had the same reaction. What is he saying there, and why does it matter? He's at a rally, he's in an arena, his fans, his followers are there, and he's telling people to get vaccinated.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but, you got to give him credit because he's telling people to do the right thing. And that's something we need more of right now. I
think Biden should put it in a campaign or in an ad.
It's not the worst idea, actually. I got to be honest with you. It's not the worst idea. It's like any way to get people to. But I mean, I don't know. The thing is, will people actually respond positively to it? And that I just don't know. Just because people are so, I think, conditioned to just be suspicious of anything that Biden does. I think they just assume that. I don't know. I mean, he got booed when he said it. He got booed by the audience.
A few people, yeah. But his point was we should take credit for it. It was a great success, and it's a. I mean, had he done that, had he had taken the pandemic, the virus seriously from the beginning, he may very well have won re-election.
He might have.
So
it's a big if.
But also, just real quick, I know you also saw this because I think you're tweeting about this as well. That Ron DeSantis didn't have the same answer when asked if he got boosted. I mean, Trump is straight up was like, yeah, I got boosted. O'Reilly's like, yeah, and then when Ron DeSantis was asked by Maria Bartiromo, I played this on yesterday's episode. You may have seen it on Fox Business, if that's a thing that someone watches. And he was like, she goes, did you get the booster? And he's like, and he ate his dick.
He did. He took out a knife and fork and he literally ate his own penis. Yeah, it was an embarrassing moment. And because he's an embarrassing human being. But, there is no political upside to acknowledging that people should get vaccinated. I mean, I guess, in fairness, I should say that many conservatives do talk about the need for people to get vaccinated. They are pretty upfront about that. And I think that's good. They just, always with the caveat that people shouldn't be forced to do it, which of course, sort of defeats the whole purpose. But, but in the case of DeSantis, I mean, I was struck by the fact that he wouldn't even say he was boosted. Why not just acknowledge it? Why not just, go on your usual stupid anti-vax rant while at least acknowledging that getting vaccinated is a good thing? But he didn't do that because, he's Ron DeSantis.
It's crazy to think that there's enough of a constituency that he or any politician has to worry about admitting that they got vaccinated. I mean, like that, there's a major now anti-vax constituency, not just movement, but a critical mass of people, at least in Florida, Republicans, that he has to cater to.
But, but here's the thing. I mean, having said that, you're right. But at the same time, like, let's not go overboard here. Okay. Right. I mean, you're talking about, the vast majority of Americans are vaccinated. The vast majority. I mean, we're talking 70 to 80% of Americans are vaccinated. And I don't really know that how much political upside there is in continuing to be the person who says you shouldn't get vaccinated. I mean, maybe there is. I don't know. But I don't know. I mean, look, for Republican constituencies, it's not going to hurt you, obviously. But it is interesting that it's not. I don't know that it's as effective politically as maybe the way that Republicans think it is. Or maybe it's effective, again, for their constituents because they're not. They're not going to penalize somebody for being anti-vax or being, not getting vaccinated. I think what's interesting in the sense is that, the Republican voters, don't give any credit for getting vaccinated, and they only give you credit for saying you don't want to get vaccinated. I mean, it is sort of a bizarre situation, but they really don't seem to care about people being healthy in this situation. I mean, they care more about people having the choice to not get vaccinated than they care about actually being vaccinated. Right. It's a bizarre situation.
Well, let's talk about the other big story, which is that on Sunday morning, Joe Manchin went on Fox News Sunday, first, episode without the great Chris Wallace, the great, and he announced that he was a no vote on Build Back Better. Just want to get your reaction on how that was done and why you think he might have done it that way in terms of he notified like somebody in the White House like 30 minutes before, apparently gave him a heads up, and then he dismissed or ignored phone calls from the president himself, is my understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I think one conclusion that you could draw from this is that Joe Manchin is an asshole. I mean, I think that is perhaps the dominant takeaway from this situation, which, he is kind of an asshole. I mean, I think that there really is no question about the fact that he's completely screwed over the Democratic Party. He screwed over President Biden. He screwed over House moderates who voted for Build Back Better, and now, which is $2 billion in spending, and now he's not going to see it pass. He screwed over House moderates who are going to be the first people to lose re-election if there's a wave election that favors Republicans, which almost seems like an inevitability at this point. So, I just think it was a terrible thing that he did. It's terrible for the country. It's terrible politically. I mean, I just think it's terrible as a colleague. I can't get over the fact that you literally have every House Democrat, 49 out of 50 Senate Democrats, the president, and Joe Manchin thinks that his views are more important than the rest of the Democratic Party. I mean, what an asshole. Sorry, but that's how I view it.
I would be a lot harsher. I'm a lot harsher. But someone, who was it, tried to call you out at our Zoom hangout, or maybe somebody emailed me or texted me, I forget where I get, but they said, Michael Cohen predicted that Joe Manchin would say yes, he would never do this to Biden. And I pushed back. I defended you because I think what we were talking about was the infrastructure bill.
No. That person's right. I said he would vote.
Oh, wow.
He'd support Build Back Better. And I'll just say for the record,
you have to eat your hat or something. What was? I think we made you have to eat a clothing item, I believe.
I think I may have to. But the thing is, I don't think this is over yet. I actually kind of think that there's still a reasonable chance something does pass. I mean, in a way, I think you almost need to have this kind of a situation in order to get, Democrats in the House to go along with Manchin's pared down bill. And look, you could do a $1.75 trillion bill that had a permanent child tax credit, that had money for climate change mitigation, that had prescription drug benefit, that had, Obamacare subsidies. They're probably I understand actually that Manchin, one he proposed was to fully fund universal pre-K, but not the child tax credit, which may be how we end up doing. And that's just incredibly stupid politically. And it's just immoral because, reducing child poverty, a child tax credit would reduce child poverty by like 40%.
Yeah.
It's a totally immoral thing to do. But, at the end of the day, it's also immoral not to do anything on climate change. And if Manchin has his way, nothing like done climate change. So my guess is that, and I hate to put it in these terms, but that, Democrats are going to have to eat a lot of shit and have to swallow a bill that they don't want to in order to, get something passed. And I would actually at this point kind of think that I wouldn't say it's likely to happen, but I'd say it's a good 50-50 possibility that would happen.
All right. Well, we'll wait before you're forced to eat whatever piece of clothing that you choose.
Yeah.
It'll be open. But you have a great piece about this over at MSNBC, and you make a lot of really good points. I think you made just a couple of them there. But it just seems, I feel like we don't want to belabor too much the reasons that he gave in light of how much spending he's approved. When he basically his best point was that he just can't approve of so much spending because that spending is going to create more inflation for the people of West Virginia. I think that was his best point.
No. I mean, he said it would actually. He said with inflationary pressures, it would make it worse, which actually is not true. It had the opposite effect. I mean, I think every economist sort of says that. But I think the bigger thing is he says, I mean, look, you have to understand, like, if you look at Manchin's arguments are utterly incoherent. I mean, it's like he's learned everything he learned from reading the blurbs on the Todd Friedman book. I mean, it is really just, I don't understand half the things he says. And I don't think he does either. I mean, I hate to say that somebody is stupid, but I don't get the impression that Joe Manchin is going to be getting a men's application anytime soon. And I think the thing so having said that, the big issue he talked about was the debt and how the debt, he said, is going to, explode under this plan, which actually it really won't. But that's his concern. And, my point is, even if that is true, he's saying that if you have too much debt, you can't tackle threats that are going to come up in the future, threats like China or Russia. But the fact is we have threats at home right now, right? We have one of the highest, declining life expectancy. We are the most overweight population in the world by far. We have one of the highest infant mortality rates, one of the highest maternal mortality rates. Expanding Obamacare subsidies might help deal with that problem.
Yeah.
We have, expanding childcare, making it universal or universal pre-K. There's lots of evidence that kids who go to universal pre-K actually have much better lives, make more money, go to high school, go to college.
Tremendous amount of evidence.
Yes. We know that if you don't fight, you might be able to have lots of money saved because you don't increase the debt. But guess what? You're going to have to spend that money eventually to deal with climate change. We have real problems here. Now, we have some of the worst educational outcomes in any developed country in the world. There is this money that the Democrats want to spend will do lots of good. And by the way, I haven't even mentioned we'll cut child poverty, which, by the way, we have a child poverty double the average of other developing countries. So this is crucially important to the threats that we face at home, the threats that Americans deal with every single day. And for Joe Manchin to put the debt over those issues that affect people right here, right now in 2021 is in my view, immoral. And it's just also incredibly stupid politically and from a policy perspective. It doesn't make any sense.
Were the progressive critics correct in retrospect that they should have passed these bills together as opposed to separately?
No, I don't think so. And I'd gotten a lot of pushback for saying this, but my basic position is that the liberals didn't have any leverage. The liberals could have said, we're not going to pass the infrastructure bill until you pass Build Back Better, and Manchin would have said, fine, we'll kill them both. Anyone who thinks that you could have pressured Joe Manchin to sign support in this bill is fooling themselves. And at the end of the day, look, $1 billion in infrastructure spending is, a big deal. It's going to help a lot of people. It's going to create a lot of jobs. It's going to actually, make Americans' lives easier. I just read today in the New York Times, there's billions going to be spent on new tunnels for Amtrak and new rail improvements. I mean, this is a big deal. So I think that, look, if I really believe that Joe Manchin would have said, okay, fine, I'm so wedded to this infrastructure bill, I'm going to be pushed around by a bunch of liberals to vote for Build Back Better, I would say, yeah, they're right. But I'm pretty sure they're wrong.
Right. All right. Well,
look at it this way. But look at it from this perspective of, the one thing that Joe Manchin seems to resist above anything else is the appearance of being pushed around by liberals. And you're going to tell me that they could have pushed him around on this? I don't buy it. Not for a second, frankly.
I think that my feeling is, and this, anybody has a great argument, that there's really not any pressure that could have come to bear to change his mind in terms of leverage, in terms of all the traditional ways that you can twist arms and make deals. I
think that's exactly right. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's exactly right. And I think that people are fooling themselves into believing otherwise.
I guess I don't understand, and I'd like to talk to some, West Virginia columnist or journalist or person about how the people of West Virginia could see basically a money train coming, and Joe Manchin stopped it, like jobs and projects and all kinds of different benefits that would make their lives better. I mean, how does that?
That's an easy one because they, it's funny. I saw somebody make this point about.
I mean, lobbyists wanted to, I don't quite understand. I mean, the economic forecast has been downgraded as a result of this. Like, this is going to be a good thing for West Virginians. Sorry, you were going to say.
No, but I think it was Henry Winkler, of all people, the Fonz, making this argument that, you just run a bunch of ads telling people in West Virginia how great Build Back Better is. And I think this is, based on this mistaken assumption that people out there have confidence in the federal government to deliver the services that Build Back Better is going to deliver. And the reality is that, most Americans don't have that confidence. And certainly in West Virginia, they don't have that confidence. They view the government with suspicion. And they think that, that nothing good is going to come from spending $2 trillion. It's just going to be wasted. It's going to be a bunch of bureaucrats in Washington. I mean, that is frustrating and it is stupid, but I think it's a pretty widely held view among people who live in West Virginia, probably. So I think that you have to sort of just take this is kind of where we are, unfortunately, as a country, is that people don't have a lot of confidence in the federal government to do the things that you and I think that they can do or even know that they can do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. I mean, I just don't know how you can cut through with a different message or different ideology. I mean, they've been thinking this way for such a long time. So they've
been told over and over again that the government doesn't do anything useful.
Right.
They've been told this over and over again, and I think it's just the height of delusion to believe that all of a sudden a couple of ads are going to convince them otherwise.
Right.
They're not.
Right. All right. Well, listen, I'll let you go, and I appreciate you joining me here today. And Christmas week,
my favorite time of the year, as you know.
Taint week coming up, the week between Christmas and New Year's, when nothing gets done.
Taint week. Yeah, that is disgusting. But I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, it's caught on over the past, I don't know, several years. I always work during Taint week. I call it Taint week. People really want to name this kind of period of time. Some people have suggested that we extend Taint week from Thanksgiving to New Year's, but I'm not quite ready for that. I think it's.
I mean, what about when you have a taint year, as we've had the past year?
It's a different.
Don't you feel like we've been living in the taint for a long time?
I mean, that's a whole different look at it. But I mean, like the words have to have meaning, Michael, and taint mean like the space between. So this is the week between Christmas and New Year's. I mean, you can't say this is the year between what and what. I mean, it's been kind of sustained period of time of a long national decline, I would say.
Sustained taintage, you might even say.
I'll take it. All right, buddy. Thank you very much. Go subscribe to Truth and Consequences. Michael hosted Jared Yates Sexton the other day, and I'm as a paying subscriber, I got to watch, and it was great. Lots of great stuff, and I'm always happy when you join me here on Stand Up. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. And hey, congratulations, by the way. 500th episode, right?
Yes, and you've been on like 400 of them. So, yeah, thank you very much, pal.
Thank you, my friend. Have a good one.
Talk to you soon.
All right.
There goes SpeechBoy71. That's his handle on Twitter, at SpeechBoy71. Truth and Consequences, truthandcons.substack.com. Go subscribe. Let him know you heard him on Twitter. Let him know you heard him here on the show on Twitter. Not that you heard him. You know what I meant. Let him know. It always matters. And now it's time to get to my next guest. But I do want to just make sure that to remind you, if you haven't already donated, it's Christmas week. I said I was going to do a full read. I'm not. I'm just saying givewell.org/standup. Givewell.org/standup. And while you're at it, go get yourself an electric toothbrush and a pair of underwear. Quip.com/standup and TommyBoy.com/standup as well. Support yourself, your undercarriage, your teeth, and the show, as well as the kids who are suffering across the world. Those are just 3 of the products that I'm happy to be working with, and services, I should say, charities and products that I'm happy to be working with. And now it's time to get to my second and final guest of today's show. She is a professor at Menlo College in California. She lectures at Stanford. She went to Yale and Columbia, and she's co-authored or authored several books, and the book we talked about today, her books cover an array of topics, including Latinx politics, LGBTQ politics, and California politics. And I just love talking to her, and hopefully I didn't joke around too much. I'm not sure if she was... I brought it down a little bit. She's a pretty sophisticated woman writing about serious issues. But we talked about her new book that she co-authored called LGBTQ, Life in America, Examining the Facts. She's on Twitter as well. By the way, her website is MelissaMichelson.com. Her Twitter handle is at Prof. Michelson, like professor, and you can find that in the show notes. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time on Stand Up, it's Professor Dr. Melissa Michelson. All right, well, I have her now, and I've never had her on the show, but I'm so excited to have her on the show for the first time. Professor Melissa Michelson, a very accomplished professor, scholar, and author. I feel uncomfortable even talking to you with my lack of education. Thank you.
Oh, no. Please be comfortable. I love talking to people about stuff. This is my job.
I know. But the plebes were but you write books and do research and interviews and articles for the rest of us, not just your students and your peers, right?
Yes, that is a lot of what I do, because I think one of the important things about being a professor is that you have a public presence, that you are also educating the public. And it's not just about your students. It's about the whole culture, the whole community.
So before we get to the reason why I had you here to talk about your new book that you co-authored about LGBTQ life in America, which is so fascinating. And it's so well written, the way it's written, the way that you ask and answer these questions, because they're the questions that so many of us have. But before I get to that, you are a very respected political science PhD professor. And so just wanted to ask you what you thought about the United States Senate. No, what you think. Well, what you think.
The Senate.
The big question I have for folks that are experts like you is just talking specifically about their thoughts on where we are at with what a lot of people think is the twilight of American democracy. How concerned are you, and what are your thoughts about where America is at the end of 2021?
I am legitimately concerned about the safety of our democracy. I think a lot of people don't realize how fragile democracy can be because, you know, they've grown up here. They've always lived with the idea of America as this pinnacle, this paragon of democracy. But the truth is that one of the reasons the founding fathers tried to limit the actual small d democracy in the Constitution was because they were very worried about it. And all democracies before ours had failed. And because over time we have changed the way our system works to be more democratic, we have actually made it more vulnerable. And it is entirely possible that we could see the end of our democracy if things don't change in the near future. So, yeah, I'm concerned. I think the political scientists are running around with their pants on fire saying, please pay attention. And, nobody's listening to us. But it's a legitimate threat.
How do you see I will ask you about the U.S. Senate in terms of it being representative and promoting democracy. I mean, everybody is tweeting about how Joe Manchin, one senator or two senators maybe, are, that represent such a small amount of people, and maybe arguably not even their own citizens' interests in their states, but that they're holding up what the vast majority of Americans want. And you could argue that throughout the last, 20 years or so, that has happened with elections, where we overwhelmingly want to see a change on this or that, but the way that our political system is made up, that one or two people can hold it up. How do you see that?
I am disappointed that that's how the system works. But of course, that is how we agreed to run the Senate. And I think the bigger problem is that we have in place rules like the filibuster that are not democratic and that are not part of the Constitution and are just these rules that we've all agreed to abide by. The fact that the ruling party, the Democratic Party, can't get even 50 people to agree to what it wants. I think, that's really not on Joe Manchin. That's more on voters in these states didn't vote for Democrats. And so there are 50 Republicans in the Senate. And so it's not really on Joe Manchin that the Build Back Better bill failed. It's more that, voters in these states supported Republican senators. And so that I don't actually see as so much of a problem for democracy, that I see as more of a political problem. I think what we should be more concerned about are things like voting rights and the integrity of elections and the degree to which there's denial and rewriting of history of the attempted coup of January 6th.
Yes. Well, I was going to ask you about voting rights. You wrote a book. I think your first book was titled Mobilizing Inclusion, Transforming the Electorate Through Get Out the Vote campaigns. And it was like scientific, apparently, because
it was pretty scientific. We did 268 randomized controlled trials. So, yeah. A lot of data, couple terabytes of data.
when I think of randomized, controlled trials, it's usually like, is an organic strawberry grown, have better health outcomes than a non-organic. Right. I guess I don't think about it as much with political science, but that's what you were able to do here. But more importantly, the question is what you just touched on about voting rights. How do you see these almost 47 states that have rolled back over 300 regulations? How do you see that hurting and affecting voting rights? What are your concerns with what's happened since the Voting Rights Act has been gutted?
Yeah, I am devastated by that part. And of course, things have been going downhill since the 2013 decision in the Supreme Court, the Shelby decision that started to gut the Voting Rights Act. And, it's discouraging because when George W. Bush signed the reauthorization in 2006, it was passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan majorities. And now what we've seen is the Republican Party deciding that because they're losing elections, because they're not as popular, they're going to manipulate the system and win elections and win power by disenfranchising people. And that, I think, is exactly the threat to democracy that we should be worried about, is that there is a political party in the United States that cares more about winning than about our free system of democratic government. And that is the threat. And they're rewriting laws at the state level. It's not just the Voting Rights Act issue, but it's these states, as you mentioned, that are rewriting the laws, that are taking power away from secretaries of state and other election officials, that are scaring even Republicans into resigning so that they don't have to face the MAGA mob. And we could have another coup in 2 or 4 years whenever Republicans decide they're going to just declare their candidates have won, even if that's not the will of the people.
Yeah. They tried to do it. A lot of them.
And they're gearing up to do it again, and they're going to be more successful now because they've learned from, we didn't quite get it in 2020, but here's all the things we're going to do now so that we can make it work next time. And this is exactly the thing where political scientists are running around saying, hello, democracy's on fire, please wake up.
I'm arguing with folks at my local Facebook page because it's what I do. And about voting. Mm-hmm. And I'm realizing, most people probably haven't thought about history or read a lot about it. But, my question is kind of like a hypothetical just for anybody. Like, shouldn't voting be easy? Like, there aren't security issues that we've actually found that have affected the outcome of any election. There's always irregularities. But, like, shouldn't it be easy to cast your vote, period? What's with all of these regulations that are making it harder to vote here at this time, or you've got to take a long wait and you can only cast your ballot this way? It just, I'm not sure exactly how other countries done it or where we do it best, but it just seems like it should be easy to vote. What's the big deal?
Well, of course it should be easy to vote, but again, the folks who are trying to make it harder to vote are not interested in democracy. They're interested in winning. And if you can't win with open voting, with convenience voting, then you make voting more difficult. I think the claims about election security and voter fraud are false. That's just the story they're telling. And of course, nobody's going to disagree with that. Of course, you want elections to be fair and you want the vote to be protected. You don't want people voting falsely. But those are false claims meant deliberately to mislead people into supporting restrictions. There is no problem that those folks are solving. It's just partisanship.
Okay, well, I guess I
don't think you're going to have much success on Facebook, though. I have to tell you, man, I've deleted Facebook and I regret nothing. So I actually disagree with. If you're talking about a local community page, and if you have a good argument for this, but I feel like that's true of like having an argument with somebody on any Facebook page, a person you don't know that could live anywhere. It could be a Russian or whatever. Yeah. But we have a community page where certain people keep posting horrific things, and I do find it my responsibility, given that I know the issues and I'm good at arguing and I'm not afraid to put my name out there. And I'm thinking about running for office locally, so I think it's a good way to let people know who I am. I'm trying to combat and confront that, and I can't let it stand. Do you think that do you think that's a good idea? Sense. I think if it's a real community page, like you're like, oh yeah, that's Chris from down the street. That's Kathy who lives around the block. Like that makes sense to me. Right. That you know who these people are. Y'all know each other. And so you're having a discussion online, but you actually, that these are real people and not, as you mentioned, Russian bots or whoever, trolls from Macedonia. So I think I agree with that. That's cool. But sometimes I interview people. I prepare a lot to interview them. And then my kind of ego or whoever I am is some people, I certainly want them to approve of me. So like, I was like, I hope she thinks. I approve of you, man. You keep up the good work.
All right. So let's move on to the book, which is super interesting and super important and valuable. LGBTQ Life in America, examining the facts. You co-wrote this book with Brian Harrison, and it's a really, I think, great book that debunks common myths and misconceptions about the LGBTQ community. It also provides all kinds of accurate information on so many different issues and their successes and shared history, and of course the challenges that are faced daily here in American society. Why did you think this book needed to be written?
Well, I think as we become more accepting of LGBTQ people more generally, folks have questions, and so on the one hand, they're supportive, but they also are afraid of asking some of these questions. And so the idea of this book is maybe you just found out that your niece is bisexual, or maybe you are wondering why everyone keeps adding pronouns to their email signatures, or you have questions, but you're worried about being rude. You're worried about saying something inappropriate. You just don't know. And you don't necessarily want to Google it because you don't know what information you can trust. So this is an academic book. This is based on reliable sources. The expectation is, it'll be in your public library. It'll be the kind of book that as a high school kid or a college student, you go and you look at in the reference section, and you just look up a few things that you're wondering about, and then you know how to interact with people better, and You don't have to like figure out like, really want to know the answer to this, but I don't want to embarrass myself and I don't want to hurt people's feelings. So just, as we become more aware of how many of our friends and neighbors and colleagues are members of the LGBTQ community, that people want answers to these things and they need a place to go.
But I'm tired of learning about people who have different lives, cultures, ethnicities, religions, and lifestyles than me. It's too much.
Well, man, you don't have to read the book, but I think a lot of people are curious. I think a lot of younger people especially are curious. Yeah,
but I mean by that is the kind of cynical take that some people have of like, they don't want it. They when a diverse, I think you gave the best example of like, if it's your niece, like somebody is going to be in your life, they're going to identify this way. Don't you want to try to understand them? And I think a lot of people are just like, no, I don't. Who are you and your co-author to answer these important questions about things like LGBTQ, identity, etc., when there seems to be some disagreement within the community itself?
Well, we write about those disagreements. So, for example, one of the chapters is about whether the word queer is a slur. And that is a legitimate debate in the LGBTQ community. Younger people feel like they're reclaiming the word and that it is powerful for them to do that. Whereas older members of the community are very uncomfortable with it. And even my co-author, he really doesn't like it, doesn't like when that word is used to describe him. And so we discuss that in the chapter. And so we're laying it all out. We're saying there's not necessarily agreement or one right answer on some of these, but here's the different perspectives. Here's why some people still think it's a slur. Here's why some people think we should be reclaiming the word. And now you know. We're not saying we have all the answers, but we're at least going to give you all of the information so that you can make your own choices.
So that is a great answer. And it is such a great, I'm learning so much. And I also think that this book makes it easier for people who don't want to necessarily or even have access to someone who identifies as transgender, gay, queer, whatever. Even if they have access to that person, they don't want to ask these questions. And you know what? Maybe that person doesn't want to answer them and they shouldn't have to. That's why your book, I think, is a real great resource that goes deep and answers so many of these questions, from identity to the political and legal treatment over times, which is a fascinating section of this book because history is so important, and so much more about where we're at and how people identify. So unless you want to respond to that, I'm going to jump right in and ask one of the questions that you answer in the book.
Sure, go ahead.
The word queer. I just mentioned that. When I was growing up, that was pejorative. And if you got called that was really insulting. That was in the early 90s. My brother now identifies as queer and owns it. So do plenty of people. And I'm always a little bit irked by it. I get a little triggered. I'm like, wait, is that a good thing?
Yeah, no, exactly. And as I was just saying, it does seem to be generational. But, these young people, they're reclaiming it. And I think there's a lot of power in that. But that doesn't mean that people who are from the 90s, who, maybe have a few more gray hairs, that they're not going to feel uncomfortable with it. And that we don't want to deny that either. And I think the important takeaway from that chapter is people who are uncomfortable with it, you probably shouldn't use that word to talk to them or to describe them. And you should just be aware of all of the meanings of that word and why for some people it's a source of power and why for some people it's triggering and, should be avoided.
When you said some of us who have a few more gray hairs and you were looking at me, did you want to say some of us might not have any? Did you want to say that, but you didn't because we don't know each other and you're this professor type?
Look, I just met you. I don't want to insult you, but
it's not insulting.
Gray hairs. I have a bunch of gray hairs. I'm proud of my gray hairs.
Just saying, some of us. I speak for the bold. So let's talk about, I'm really fascinated about the question of is it a choice, sexual identity? Because for years, I argued that it was not a choice. Mostly in reference, we were talking first about don't ask, don't tell, and then we were talking about marriage equality. But now it would seem that some people are owning that it can be. You are on a spectrum of some sort. What does the science say? What do the activists say and human rights activists on these issues think about that question now? Because I can kind of see it both ways, and frankly, it shouldn't matter.
Most of the science, most of the research shows that it's really not a choice. Your sexual orientation, your gender identity, that is just who you are, just as you are white or black or Asian American, just as, you are who you are, and you really can't change that. But the nuance comes in terms of these identities and orientations being a spectrum. So, for example, you might not be 100% heterosexual or 100% gay. You might have, stronger attraction towards men than women or stronger attraction to women than men, but you could go either way. And so to a certain extent, sure, you could say, well, it's a choice to decide I'm going to have as my partner somebody who I then am able to present to the world as heterosexual. But not everybody has that choice, because where they are on the spectrum means that that's not something that's going to bring them long-term happiness. So it's really not a choice at all. But if you are on the continuum to a degree where you could decide that the way the world's going to see you is more heterosexual, then, I don't even know how to describe that in a way that makes it a choice. It's not a choice. It's who you are. But sometimes your choices make you seem less gay, I guess is how I would finish that up.
Yeah, people always that know me were like, dude, you're the least gay guy, but still, you must be a little... Nobody says that. But what they do say, what I do say is that there needs to be a category for me who I think I'm straight, but I want an LGBTQ plus the Amazon guy, because I don't know what's going on with me, but this guy, every time he comes by, I want him to stay.
Well, that's awesome. And it's good that you're open to that. And I think part of what is going on with people is maybe they live their whole life a certain way, but then, these things are also fluid. And so maybe, as you get on in years, maybe you do move on the spectrum a little bit. And I think that's also an important takeaway from the book, is that, you might go 30, 40, 50 years of your life thinking you're one thing. And then you wake up one day and you go, oh, actually, the Amazon guy's super hot, and so maybe I'm not that. Well,
I was actually lying, because the truth is I've told this story many times, and I was just switching it up for the audience. It's actually the plumber.
That's cool, man.
I never expected the plumber to be this hot dude. My daughter and I were like, well, who's this dude?
You just got to be open to it, man. You just got to be who you are, and I think that's an important takeaway for people too.
So. It's a really complicated question. I think it's the first question that you answer in this book, but it's so important. How is sexual behavior, sexual orientation, and gender identity? You asked the question, how are they related to each other? It could be also asked, like, what is the difference between these terms? It's real easy to get caught up and misappropriate them. I've done it many times.
Mm-hmm. I think the easiest way to think about it is your sexual orientation is who you want to go to bed with. Your gender identity is who you want to go to bed as. I'm not making that up. It's somebody else came up with that, but it's who you are versus who you are attracted to and who you want to be intimate with. And those are completely separate. Your identity as male, female, genderqueer is separate from who you would like to be intimate with. And obviously, it depends whether they're attracted to somebody who is male or female or non-binary or something else, but it's still a separate question.
I want to ask just about, I'm jumping around here with the book, but sure. So much good stuff that I want to touch on. Only a few more minutes, and everybody should get and buy this book and read it and learn. I'm learning.
Excellent. Yes, everybody should buy this book.
Yeah, we're going to, I want this to sell more than J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter. It's so important. I'm learning so much. So about hate crimes and the movement right now, about violence against LGBT folks, Where are we at right now? You know, there's a whole arc of history on this, obviously, where there's so many variables about people coming out. Are they openly? Are they not? Obviously, the AIDS epidemic and what that did to stigmatize gay people further. How are we doing?
Well, terrible. We're doing terrible. Hate crimes are rampant. Hate crimes against transgender women of color, in particular, Black transgender women, is an epidemic. And we're barely scratching the surface, probably, because as we describe in the book, there are so many jurisdictions where they're not even submitting any data. And so the idea that, for example, there were 0 LGBTQ hate crimes in Alabama, no, I don't buy it. So obviously there's massive underreporting. So even with the data that we have, it's an epidemic, and it just should be disturbing to everybody. But we also should keep in mind that there's probably a lot more hate going on that just isn't getting reported or is being misreported as a regular quote unquote crime and not a hate crime.
Yeah, I mean, as you're talking, I know nothing about how things happen, but I mean, I would imagine violence is just not reported at all to anybody. I mean,
why would you report it if you fear that when you report, you're going to be misgendered or you're going to be further stigmatized and victimized in
your own home, like in your own home, you're going to be stigmatized in your own community, your own church, whatever it might be. But I mean, and not to mention, and you've written a lot about this and know you're an expert on this, you know, undocumented folks that have crimes, any crimes committed against them. Your car gets stolen. You don't want to report that. So there's just so many good questions here. I love to talk about and learn about and think about the spectrum of masculinity and femininity and why it matters. And I like to add why it shouldn't necessarily matter now more than ever before. But you ask these questions that I wouldn't even think to, like, I almost find they would be inappropriate, but I'm so glad. Are gay men less masculine than straight men? Do lesbians and straight women harbor different views and attitudes towards men? Do gay men hate women, especially lesbians? Like, if that doesn't make you want to buy this book and learn about the answer to those questions, can we just do one of them maybe? And because I'm biased,
it's all good stuff.
Yeah, gay men, straight men, masculinity. Yeah. What? Why? Like, it's so important. And what did you learn?
Well, the thing is, you know, gay men grow up as men. And so, of course, they are programmed by society to support the patriarchy and to think that men are somehow inherently more valuable or better at things than women. And so if you grow up as a man in the United States, you are going to suck up a certain degree of toxic masculinity, a certain degree of thinking that men are better than women, a certain degree of this sense that you're better than women. It doesn't inure you from being a sexist. It's right. Gay men don't get a pass on racism or sexism because they've grown up in this white patriarchal system. So of course,
yeah. I mean, I've talked to many. Sorry to interrupt you. I mean, just to call it what it is. I've talked several times about the harassment that I've dealt with from gay men in the entertainment business. You know, all kinds of stuff. I wasn't like horrible, but that was propositioned several times for work and, you know, obviously all kinds of comments. But like sometimes people don't want to talk about that because somehow, you know, they're gay. No, they're men. They're you know, exactly. Call it whatever it is. It's not it's still wrong and inappropriate and unprofessional.
Yeah,
damaging.
Absolutely.
Sorry, but
I'm sorry that happened to you. But again, right. Men grow up as men in a society that teaches them that they can get away with these things. And so, yeah. Sorry, gay men, you don't get a pass.
Right. What about that question about, like, you know, it's just, God, every time these awful people will go after some strong woman or feminist woman on Twitter or whatever, it's always, you hate men. And it's like,
it's not right. And they don't hate men. They just don't care if men find them attractive. It's really the only difference.
Well, there's that.
You know, they don't have to go through life worried about how men are looking at their bodies or, if they've got their face on, because they don't care if men think they're attractive. But other than that, they don't hate men. They're just kind of indifferent to them. And I think for many men who are used to the world catering to the male gaze, they find that threatening, because they thought the understanding was that all women were always trying to be attractive to them and to please them. And then, oh my gosh, here are these women who don't care. That's, when you lose your privilege, it seems like a threat. It seems like a loss. And I mean, it is, but not that they hate them.
So before I let you go, I want to end, I think, on a positive note. I've been following, the gay rights movement as long as I've been in media, and I think probably even before, for sure. And obviously, thought about it and supported it. And I've seen a lot of progress, like on this issue, probably more than anything else that we've talked about, that I've talked about. And I think I've covered it all in my 14 years talking about public affairs. I've seen a lot of progress. There's still a long way to go. Yeah. How do you do answer this in terms of the history part of the book, as well as the public visibility part of the book? Adoption still seems to be problematic, and there are plenty of other issues in terms of violence and crimes and so on. But tell me about how far you think we've come towards equality and progress on LGBTQ rights, and where we need to go.
Yeah, that is a happy part of this story, because we really have come an enormously long way. In 25 years, we've gone from only a quarter of the public supporting same-sex marriage to vast, strong majorities supporting it, and of course, supportive rulings from the Supreme Court. We've gone from a very small proportion of Americans thinking that consensual relationships between same-sex couples are okay, to large majorities, again, thinking, yeah, whatever, I'm cool with that. And so, yeah, there's a lot more progress to be made on adoptions and parenting. We saw that with all the coverage of Secretary Pete and his children. We have ongoing challenges in terms of hate and especially acceptance of the transgender, genderqueer community. But real progress is being made. And I think that young people are so much more open, so much more accepting and inclusive is a hopeful sign. And, eventually the boomers will fade out of the picture and the younger people will replace them in the population, right? As we say, the problem will be solved in part due to cohort replacement, but actually even older people are actively reconsidering, actively changing their minds. And we've seen, the dogs are excited about it. We've seen huge shifts in public opinion, and it's really quite impressive. And it all stems from the gay community being willing to stand up for themselves in the face of the AIDS epidemic, to, as Harvey Milk said, to come out to their friends and their families and their neighbors and save themselves. And it's working. That people are, yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, and I wonder if that's your delivery guy and if he's as sexy as mine. But and the dogs love it. But do you worry, given what we're seeing on women's equality and women's reproductive rights and the steps we're taking back there, that we could make similar steps back, given a minority of conservative legislators at a state level, much less the national level? Do you worry about steps back, or do you feel like these gains are pretty safe?
I am worried about backstepping. There's a really great book by a couple of political scientists that talks by Roger Smith that talks about how progress is often 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's something that's said beyond political science, right? Yeah, we might see some losses. We could see the Supreme Court overturn Obergefell. We could see losses at the state level as well.
Which is the marriage equality, gay marriage.
Yes, marriage equality. Yeah. But I think the overall trend is towards success. That doesn't mean that when society and folks who are opposed to LGBTQ rights are threatened, that they won't push back, and that maybe there is sometimes some temporary losses, some temporary backsteps. But I think overall, the movement is progressive. I think overall the movement is towards more acceptance and more inclusion and more recognition of people's rights as humans to have all the equality as people who are heterosexual. But yeah, in the short term, there could be devastating reversals and losses.
Well, I really appreciate getting to know you and your work, and this is such a fascinating and important book that I'm learning so much about, and I highly recommend everybody get it. LGBTQ, Life in America, Examining the Facts. Doctor, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Melissa Michelson, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Pete. Have a great day.
And there it is. That is the final conversation and part of today's episode. Dr. Melissa Michelson. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope she enjoyed that. I got a little silly. At Prof. Michelson on Twitter, melissamichelson.com on her website. That's her website. And she, of course, is the Dean of Arts and Sciences, a political science professor at Menlo College, California. I hope that she will come back on. Let her know that you heard her here. Always great to let first-time guests know that you heard them on the show, and on Twitter, especially at Prof. Michelson. All right, that is all I've got for you today. I am so happy that you tuned in to today's show. I very much appreciate your listening, commitment to the show, and support of the show. If you haven't signed up for a paid subscription, please do now. StandUpWithPete.com is the website. All right, right now I'm planning to have on tomorrow's show comedian David Feldman, and we'll make it a Waj Wednesday. Wajahat Ali has agreed to sit down with me for another great conversation. That's coming up tomorrow. I hope you're doing okay. Check us out in the Discord platform if you're a stand-up community member, and I will talk to you then. Love you guys. John Carroll, by the way, has a new single out. Should we play John Carroll's new single and let us? You know what? I'm gonna get permission from him to play it. But it's called "Rich Man's Daughter." You can get it on johncarroll.org. We'll stick with stand up for today, and if it's cool with him, I'll play at least part of the new single tomorrow. I love you guys. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Johnny Carroll, boy, take us out.
See him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how.